right. The Gathering of Clouds. Keep in mind that not the next chapter, the chapter after that is the clouds burst. So we're getting some metaphor in there, some symbolism. The storm clouds are gathering. Some bad things are coming still, even though the dragon is dead. So the dwarves and Bilbo, they learned that the dragon is dead from a raven. Well, the thrush was trying to tell them, and then they brought a raven, and they were able to speak to the raven. You can talk to birds occasionally in this world, which is cool. The ravens, unlike the crows, are wise and respectful, and they help the dwarves out quite a lot. Roak, the kind of lead raven, has some excellent lines. As Thorin is kind of trying to gather strength so he can keep a hold of his treasure hoard, even as there's a bit of a threat from the men and the elves in the area. So the Elven King helped out the men of Lake Town, and they're coming to see if they can get the gold. Because first of all, they didn't know that the dwarves were still alive, and then they feel like they have a claim, especially the men, to some of that treasure. The raven's wisdom: we would see peace once more among dwarves, men, and elves after the long desolation, but it may cost you dear in gold. I have spoken, Roak the raven. So looking back in time to before the dragon came, the dwarves, obviously they were miners, they were craftsmen, they had all these good things going for them. They had a lot of wealth flowing their way. They did not even bother to grow their own food. And they had this really good relationship with the men in the area, especially the men of Dale, where they were able to buy their food and be provided, because you still need food even as you're really concerned with gold and treasure and stuff. And Roak wants things to kind of go back to how things were back in those days, which is understandable. So why would peace be worth more than gold? Obviously, if you don't have peace in this case, you're going to starve. The dwarves are. And really, is the treasure all that important? I guess would be a question to ask these dwarves. Obviously, they think they have what they think. Bilbo has what he thinks, and it all kind of comes into conflict. So Bard and Thorin, they have this conversation. They kind of lay out their claims for the gold. Thorin rejects Bard at this point, claiming that he will speak to them once the elves are gone. He's got a bit of a grudge against them, understandably. But even so, Bard does have some good claims to the treasure. First of all, he's the one that killed the dragon. They wouldn't have access to the treasure at all if the dragon wasn't dead. He also talks about how some of the treasure came from Dale. The dragon stole it from Dale, which by right of inheritance should be Bard's, because he was descended from Girion, Lord of Dale. And he also talks about how, my next slide, a bit of talking about pity. We just had our town destroyed. You have all these resources. You could help out. A good king, a good person would help out of pity. Thorin rejects that, all of it. And obviously Thorin has, an inherited right. He's come all this way. He has done a lot to get this treasure back. So possession being 9/10 of the law is the saying. He has the gold right now, but who is in the right? I would say Bard is being the more reasonable. I think even Bilbo, some of the other dwarves would agree with that. So there is this idea of justice and injustice going on, where Thorin obviously is being affected by the treasure, maybe a bit of dragon sickness, not thinking straight, not being the person that we've seen him to be. Going back to this idea of pity, I want to call back to the roles that pity's played in the story. Remember, Bilbo had pity on Gollum. The Eagles had pity on the dwarves. Beorn had pity on the dwarves. There's been a lot of pity going on. Pity is always a good thing in Tolkien. It's not usually like you wouldn't want to be pitied in real life. You wouldn't want people kind of being condescending towards you. But pity in this case is more like a recognition of suffering and an outrage of help. So that's usually a very, very good thing in Tolkien. So the gathering of clouds, that suggests that there's going to be a storm coming. Bilbo in the next chapter is going to try to avert that. Let's see how successful he is.